Moving on for now, though, the European Union has announced plans to effectively ban the sale of petrol and diesel cars by 2035. The move could have a knock-on effect for Australia, impacting cars sold here and forcing drivers to buy electric cars. Joining us now from the Electric Vehicle Council is the CEO, Behyad Jafari. Really appreciate your time. Thank you. Firstly, just explain for us what the EU is actually doing. I understand their plans are around cutting emissions by 100% by 2035, and that then really flows on to effectively spell the death knell for petrol and diesel cars. Is that right?
That's right. So there are some interim milestones in there, namely by 2030 they'll be looking to cut about 55% of emissions from their transport sector, and particularly from light vehicles, so things like cars, vans, utes and the like. And then by 2035, entirely banning the sale of vehicles that emit from the tailpipe at all. So that will move their market towards predominantly electric vehicles. There will be probably some room in there as well for things like hydrogen vehicles or vehicles that run entirely off of e-fuels. But again, it provides some really great certainty for the world's automotive market, that the second largest market in the world have said, we are now banning petrol and diesel vehicles, therefore put all of your investment in zero emissions vehicles. All up, that means that about 45% of the world's new car sales market has that same ban date in place. So a few other markets already have this. And something like 18 car companies around the world have said we'll also stop building petrol and diesel cars by 2035.
Okay, so when you look at those other major nations that you're alluding to there and the timeline they're working towards, where are they at? Are most of the big players in that same 2035 ballpark? Are some even sooner?
So only about one or two are sooner. So markets like Norway, for instance, they aimed to be at 100% zero emissions by 2025, and they're now something like 95% of cars sold in their market are zero emissions vehicles or electric vehicles. Most of those are the ones that come in 2025 and 2030 are smaller markets though, but markets like the UK, the European Union, California, which is a quite large market all on its own, let alone the rest of the United States, a few markets within China, states within China that by themselves account for a very large percentage of all new vehicles sold, have made those same resolutions. So 2035 is really that key year that most markets are picking. There's a very good reason for why. When people buy a new car, it stays on the road for about 15 or 20 years. So if you're looking at being able to achieve zero emissions by 2050, that means you have to work your way back 15 years, and from 2035 onwards, not allowing any new petrol or diesel vehicles to keep entering your market. So in those countries, used petrol and diesel vehicles will still be on the road. People will still be able to buy and sell used ones or continue driving the ones that they have. It just means that the new stock that comes in will only be from one source of technology.
Okay, so how does Australia fit into all of this? We've really been lagging behind when it comes to the uptake of EVs, haven't we?
Yeah, there are two ways to look at it. One, which is that in the long term, this certainty around the world that the future of transport is in electric vehicles means that more car companies will be building different types of electric vehicles. We've been seeing something that's really important in Australia, more electric utes already being built, as well as every major car company having plans to build them and deliver them around the world throughout this decade. I think the big challenge for us in Australia is that due to the lack of our Australian regulations, for the past few years we have been a dumping ground for less efficient vehicles. So that means that Australians have to pay more to buy more petrol and diesel to do the same job as drivers overseas. And of course, the latest and greatest technology in electric vehicles, fewer of them have been bought here. So as the rest of the world and markets like the EU keep accelerating their efforts, the challenge there is that companies will start to continue to prioritise them even further and leave us behind, meaning that we'll be waiting longer to get a hold of the new technology. Resolving that is really simple. It's up to us to introduce standards like fuel efficiency standards that the federal government is now finally looking at, bring them in place and make sure that they are as strong as these other markets like the United States, European Union and New Zealand.
So just give us a snapshot as to where we're at now with this in Australia. When it comes to new cars being bought, what proportion of those right now are EVs?
So last year, about 3.8% of new cars sold were electric vehicles. The really key bit to remember in that is every single electric vehicle that came to Australia was sold out. And often when they came, they were sold out within a matter of hours. So our far bigger challenge isn't actually demand. It's not getting more people to want to buy electric vehicles. It's supply. It's getting more of the electric vehicles that are already being built and being shipped around the world to be sent here to Australia. And car companies tell us very clearly that every developed country in the world but Australia and Russia have some form of fuel efficiency standard in place. That means that we have to prioritise those markets in order to avoid paying penalties or to avoid missing our targets. Because you don't, you fall at the very end of the list and you get what's left over. By all means, we see that the demand's there. Australians want these vehicles. Adopt these standards, make sure they're as strong as other markets, and you'll see increased supply to your market.
Okay, interesting to hear your take on that. Thank you so much. I did want to talk about infrastructure with you as well, but we'll save that for another day because we know that that's such a big part of this equation too, but we're out of time. So thank you so much for joining us,
Happy to come back.
Jafari.
Thanks.